Ladies and gentlemen, co-chairs, members of the Troika, members of Parliament, dear colleagues. We really cannot begin this meeting, a meeting of Europeans, without a minute of silence to honour the victims of the terrible assault on our Ukrainian friends just on our very borders, and which bring back to our minds the images and feelings that we thought we would never experience again on our continent, which has been so frequently war-torn. It reminds us that our union, which was built to put that past behind us, is so valuable, and we should cherish moments like this where we can enjoy that union in close contact with our peoples.
Je vous remercie.
Thank you all very much. In this context, I'd like to begin by saying what an honour it is for us to welcome you to the 10th meeting of the Joint Parliamentary Scrutiny Group for Europol. I wish each and every one of you a very warm welcome. The health situation is still difficult, and therefore we were not able to bring you all to the French Parliament. And after discussing this with the European Parliament, we decided that we would continue with remote meetings, as we have since the beginning of the pandemic. Fortunately, this meeting is probably well suited to having a remote meeting, because I know that this is a very closely knit group and you're all very actively involved in the work that it does. I'm sure that we will be able to have a lively and in-depth discussion. At the outset, I would like to stress that the French Parliament is very attached to this original scrutiny body. It has to be confessed that many of the interparliamentary conferences are somewhat abstract in terms. They deal with topics that are very national, relating to the governments that are chairing the meeting, and a bit removed from immediate European legislative current affairs. But obviously that's not the case today. We have here a scrutiny group that is a standing group, and it's really rooted in the rules of procedure that define Europol's missions. It has concrete and sweeping prerogatives. Above all, the meetings are held very regularly, and this means that there can be intense dialogue and vigilant scrutiny in close cooperation with the national parliaments and the European Parliament. Here we're at the heart of the exercise of sovereignty, with the right balance between the effective working of an agency that's indispensable to ensure the security of our fellow citizens, but also in compliance with freedoms and fundamental rights, which are at the very core of the mission of our parliaments. I think that this is a very good template. It could be an example for other agencies in the Union, for instance, Frontex, which is scaling up, and obviously probably similar measures will have to be implemented as they have for scrutinising Europol. Dear co-chairs, we have the usual session that's devoted to recent activities of the agency. This will be introduced by the Executive Director, the Chair of the Management Board, and the European Data Protection Controller. We've also chosen to talk about two specific topics. The first relates to migrant smuggling. This is a particularly heinous form of crime that tramples on the dignity of human beings and also fans the flames of populism everywhere in Europe. It has taken on completely unacceptable scale. Its revenue, if I can put it that way, which feeds on misery and tragedy, is estimated at more than 5 billion euros a year. The groups that organise this smuggling are ever better organised. Our national authorities have great difficulty in fighting them off, and we need the support of our partners. Europol is vital in this fight. The second topic relates to the opportunities but also the risks arising directly and concretely from the advances in artificial intelligence for Europol in the exercise of its mission. Some of you may be surprised by how far criminals have come and how much they use artificial intelligence. We encourage the agency, whose missions and means have at last been substantially reinforced with the new mandate. Our partners from the European Parliament will explain this to us, and this will help us to rise to this major challenge. And of course, as is usually the case, the Commissioner Johansson and the French Minister of the Interior, Gérald Darmanin, will, on behalf of the Council, present to us their vision of the quality of the work done by the agency, the priorities they want to fix, and will also be taking stock of the outstanding cooperation throughout the Union between the law enforcement authorities of member countries and Europol. I would like to thank you for your attention, and I will now give the floor to the co-chair, François-Noël Buffet, who is speaking from the French Senate. Thank you very much indeed, Madam Chair, dear Yael, for this introduction. I too would like to say that I'm delighted that the Scrutiny Group is meeting anew, and I'd like to greet all of the MPs who have been able to take part in this meeting. We all are acutely aware of the many threats to Europe. This has become more obvious than ever before. Terrorism is, of course, unfortunately, still a very topical threat. But organised crime is also a threat to our security and our lifestyle. And it exploits all of the failings in national systems, as we've seen over recent months with the COVID-19 pandemic. Criminal groups have tried to profit from the unusual situation. Furthermore, a lot of these threats relate to the digital environment, or they are facilitated by the use of digital tools. A recent example, cyber attacks in a number of large ports in the north of Europe. So there are many threats. The Europol agency has demonstrated that it provides effective operational support to member countries in analysing and detecting risks and fighting all forms of crime which could harm our common interests and threaten our lifestyles. These threats are changing all the time, and this means that Europol's missions and its resources have to change as well. And this is why the rules of procedure have been revised, and this has now been agreed upon with an extension of its mandate, so its powers regarding data exchange with private parties has been broadened. These private parties are obviously very important in detecting and fighting these threats. Indeed, they are strategic. We also need to step up its ability to analyze and use big data, of course, always in compliance with the data protection rules. We will probably be talking about the improvement of cooperation with other agents of the Union, in particular the European Public Prosecutor's Office, and improvements that have been introduced recently in feeding data into the Schengen Information System. As a scrutiny group, it will, of course, fall to us in the course of this meeting and beyond to ensure that Europol has the necessary financial and operational means to carry out its missions in this new framework. This is our responsibility towards those working for Europol, and also our law enforcement authorities in our own countries who need support from Europol. I will not continue any further. I'd just like to thank you for your attention, and I will now give the floor to our colleague Juan Fernando López Aguilar.
Merci. Monsieur López Aguilar intervendrá un peu plus tard.
Actually, Mr. López Aguilar will intervene a little bit later.
Désolé.
Pas de souci. Merci, mes chers collègues.
Don't worry, there's no problem. So let me tell you about the outcome of the Troika meeting that we held earlier this morning. During the meeting, we approved the agenda of this meeting. In keeping with the rules of procedure, we discussed the questions and written contributions that came in. In all, the co-chairs have received 5 questions since the last meeting, with 2 have received replies from Europol. This has been shared with all the delegations. Another question was answered just before the meeting, and the answer will be disseminated after this meeting. We did briefly talk about the fact that not all the questions had been answered by Europol, and all of the members of the Troika felt that answers should be provided in all cases and within a reasonable lapse of time, and they should not be as brief as they sometimes are at the moment. So we would like to invite the Executive Director of Europol to ensure that the questions are answered swiftly and completely. We also took advantage of the opportunity to listen to our Czech and Swedish friends about the future priorities they're considering for the group when they have the presidency of the European Union Council. Finally, we had a clear presentation of the outcome of interinstitutional negotiations about the revised mandate of Europol. This was somebody replacing Mr. López Aguilar. So we can now proceed with a debate about Europol's activities.
Vous pouvez continuer, Madame Brampuy.
Please continue.
Très bien, je vous remercie. Donc, je vous remercie.
Thank you very much indeed. Please let us know as soon as Mr. López Aguilar is available to speak. He will obviously be given the floor as a matter of priority. So this means that we will be listening to the presentations, and they will be followed by an exchange. So the first presentation will be given by the Executive Director, who unfortunately, because of the current crisis, is not with us today, but we will be listening to you for 15 minutes.
Donc, c'est Madame Debol, Catherine
Debol, for a 15-minute presentation.
Madam, distinguished members of the European Parliament, distinguished members of the national parliaments of the European Union, Mrs. Brown-Pivet and Mr. Buvet, Mr. Juan Fernando López Aguilar, it's a great honor and pleasure to see and to meet you today, even it is still virtually. We are gathering for the 10th GPSG meeting, and it's an important occasion for us and for me to allow me to share with you some considerations. But first of all, I would like to start with explaining Europol's involvement on what is happening in Ukraine. Europol is a partner of Ukraine with whom we have an operational agreement in place since 2017. Europol stands with the Ukrainian law enforcement community at this critical moment. We are in permanent contact with the Ukraine liaison officer and with the bureau here at the Europol's headquarters. And we have mobilized resources to provide any analytical and technical support within the boundaries, of course, of our mandate. Europol is also in contact with EU member states and operational partners, law enforcement agencies, as well as the relevant EU institutions, the bodies and the agencies, in order to ensure that we have a comprehensive EU situational picture on the risks of violence and crime, and of course including cyber attacks in the EU. For that, Europol has partially activated last week its EU law enforcement emergency response protocol for cyber crisis, in order to establish a constant monitoring mechanism and support the coordination of the law enforcement community as response to such attacks in the EU member states. We will continue to support all our law enforcement partners and the citizens that they protect who are impacted by this conflict. The 10th GPSG meeting today, and the GPSG was established by the legislator in 2017. Since the establishment, I can say it has become a key institutional stakeholder for Europol. And I take your comments on board, Madam Chair, to have a look at the questions and answer and to do better in the future. The support of the GPSG has been tangible. It has helped raising awareness on European level and on national level on our work and the contribution to keep citizens safe and to keep the community safe. And before addressing the topics of the panel, let me express my gratitude to the European Parliament and the Council, under the steering of the French presidency, for reaching a provisional agreement on the revised mandate of Europol earlier this month. I would like to thank also the European Commission for its work, which made possible to reach such a quality compromise. The role of GPSG will further develop, and I look forward to continuing the fruitful cooperation. The new mandate will allow Europol to operate in the developing digital environment, and our support to member states will further contribute to operational results. It will strengthen Europol's role as the information hub and provide the agency with an even stronger legal mandate and framework for data processing. Additional resources to implement the mandate will be made available upon the entry into force of the revised mandate. During my intervention, I would like to provide you with a brief overview of the latest developments from a governance perspective, an update on our operational activities, and the latest developments with the European Data Protection Supervisor. End of January, we transmitted to the GPSG the draft multi-annual programming document 2023-2025. The Europol Strategy 2020 Plus remains the basis for our multi-annual programming document, and we will be looking forward to receiving your comments in the upcoming months. As announced during the last GPSG meeting, a few organizational changes occurred in early 2022. The Information Management Unit was set up and became fully operational, and under the lead of the newly appointed Chief Information Officer, Mr. Diobesio, the new unit combines the knowledge of information management, strategy, planning, and business product management with the expertise of the Innovation Lab team. The new structure brings benefits, notably as a single point of contact for information management activities for our stakeholders. Last week, we started the recruitment of short-term seconded national experts from the member states. This is a new modular approach which allows to join forces and build up the answer to difficult cases. Those professionals will step up Europol's work on a wide-ranging and complex investigation. Most importantly, Europol's revised legal basis will pave the way for a stronger and a more efficient level of support in the areas of innovation and research. The enhanced possibility for cooperation with the private sector will certainly make the difference in fighting criminality. Our planned internal developments are aligned with the key EU strategies like the Security Union, the Cyber Strategy, the Strategy to Tackle Organized Crime, Anti-Money Strategy, Counter-Terrorism Agenda, among others. And having in mind all these elements, I believe it's also time to reflect on an update of the Europol Strategy 2020+. And in the coming months, I will consult all relevant stakeholders, as I did at the beginning of my mandate in 2018. I will keep you, of course, updated of these developments. The nature of organized crime networks requires enhanced cooperation with third parties. Therefore, facilitating Europol's cooperation with these countries remains a priority. Our external relation activities developed around the external strategy for the years 2021-2024, which is also part of our multi-annual programming. As already outlined in previous meetings, enhanced cooperation with Western Balkan, Eastern Partnership countries, and Northern Africa remains key priority. It is very important to keep also a strong transatlantic cooperation with the US, Australia, New Zealand, and Canada. And we continue to see the need to explore further our cooperation framework with Latin America to further facilitate the exchange of strategic and operational information in a number of crime areas, illicit drugs trafficking being the number one in that area. The operational agreement between Europol and Colombia, for instance, allows to work directly together on investigations. Our cooperation has led to major operational successes and arrests of kingpin drug traffickers. This week, I am hosting the ministers for the regions at our headquarters here at Europol. In the second half of 2021, we signed the working arrangement and administrative arrangement with the UK, as well as working arrangements with Armenia, Andorra, San Marino, and South Korea. I would now like to turn to the operational activities of the agency. The pandemic continued, of course, to have an impact on our lives. Europol's support to your national authorities increased again in 2021 as we provided operational support to more than 2,500 operations. The majority of these operations were related to serious and organized crime, such as drugs trafficking, but also to counter-terrorism. In 2021, Europol's operational centers supported 335 operational action days, resulting in more than 5,000 arrests of criminals. The threat of serious and organized crime and terrorism has not diminished, and the level of violence linked to crime is increasing across the whole of the European Union. Although the situation is challenging, we are successful in countering organized crime. The fight against drugs trafficking is an uphill battle. However, the number of arrests and the record seizures of drugs show that we are on the right track. In Belgium and in the Netherlands, more than 160 tons of cocaine were seized, worth of 18 billion euros. We supported high-level cases like you might have heard of Sky UCC, EncroChat and Greenlight. They have given unprecedented insights with enormous volumes of data. We observe that criminal networks dealing with large-scale drugs trafficking are highly responsive to external factors. When it comes to migrant smuggling, Europol is applying the all-route approach and supporting frontline member states by processing relevant information swiftly, providing analysis support to prioritized investigations, and coordinating with member states and liaison bureau. Since July, we are supporting with our experts on the field in Belarus, Lithuania, and in Warsaw. And our analysts are also still supporting France on the spot in the region of Calais. In the area of counterterrorism, we supported more than 1,000 operations in 2020, the majority linked to jihadi terrorism and terrorism content online. In 2021, special attention was also given to right-wing and left-wing extremism, and we saw an increase of more than 20% of member states' contributions to Europol on non-jihadi terrorism. In November 21, Europol, in cooperation with the European Commission, organized a tabletop exercise to test the implementation of the EU crisis protocol. The production, of course, and dissemination of child sexual abuse remains another major concern. We responded with another victim identification task force organized by the Cybercrime Center. And in 2021, our 5 specialized operational centers produced more than 22,000 operational reports. Let me now spend a few words on the relation to the so-called Big Data Challenge. I already updated you on the developments in the previous GPSG meeting, and Europol took also place in a dedicated meeting on the subject on the 1st of February this year. This meeting dealt with the EDPS decision issued on the 3rd of January 2022. In April 2019, I requested in full transparency the guidance of EDPS for the processing of large and complex data sets that Europol is entrusted by member states and operational partners in lawful criminal justice investigation. I approached the EDPS because compliance with fundamental rights, including data protection, has represented a founding pillar of Europol right from the start of our work more than 20 years ago, and Europol has built a solid data protection ecosystem across the law enforcement community. About the decision of the 3rd of January 2022, the decision represents new implementation guidance 5 years after the current legal framework of Europol entered into force in May 2017. We have taken significant efforts to respond to the decision by the EDPS. An action plan with 5 points has been implemented, apart from one activity due to technical implementation. The core of our activities is about the continuous review of the data that have been provided to us. The EDPS confirmed in his decision that Europol needs time to process large data sets in a legally compliant manner and to determine categories for the data that we work on. However, the EDPS established that Europol should apply the shortest time period for data processing mentioned in the Europol regulation, in this case 6 months, and accordingly the EDPS ordered Europol to erase all datasets received after this decision for which the data categorization is not completed within 6 months. For data provided to Europol before the decision, the EDPS granted a grace period of 12 months. And from an operational perspective, these 6 months for establishing the data categories is not sufficient. Against this background, we welcome the provisional agreement on the revised Europol regulation reached by the legislator on the 1st of February. Among many improvements, the amendments set a clear, explicit maximum time period for determining the data subject categories, and the proposed legal framework takes into account the operational needs for Europol. In the meantime, I confirm to you that we are implementing the EDPS decision, and the first report will be provided to the EDPS at the beginning of April 2022. 2021 was a challenging year, but it was a successful year. We were able to continue the support for the national authorities in several high-level investigations, leading to a high number of arrests, but even more important, protecting our citizens from becoming a victim. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you very much for that. Now I should like to hand over to the European Data Protection Supervisor, Mr. Wojciechowski.
Madam Chair, ladies and gentlemen, honorable members of the European Parliament and the national parliaments, I welcome you from Gdansk in Poland. I'm not at the moment in Paris. I'm not taking part in the meeting in the real world. I'm connecting from the University of Gdansk, where I have at the moment the lectures with the next generation of the specialists in the fighting the cybercrime and teaching them about the work of the Europol, which is the basis and the ground for these activities. Let me start this presentation on recent developments in cooperation between Europol and the data protection authorities, and by saying that probably this is the last time and the last meeting of the GPSG under current legal framework of the Europol. And while the changes of the regulation are bringing certain improvement, and we have to assess that, as it was said by Madame de Boll, they bring better and easier situation for Europol to deal with the new technologies and to deal with the new developments in the information and communication. At the same time, the role of the EDPS will in practice be largely limited after the changes that are now envisaged. This will have a negative impact on the possibility of the European Data Protection Supervisor to bring to you detailed and operational information about Europol activities from the perspective of the administrative supervisory authority, with the duty to conduct inquiries. As the result, it will limit the ability of the joint group to make informed opinion on such activities. Nonetheless, the EDPS will continue to do its utmost to exercise its role of an independent supervisory authority dedicated to monitoring of Europol's compliance. Firstly, as you know, after 2 years of the investigation and the issuance of the admonishment in September 2020, the EDPS found that the processing of the data concerning individuals with no established link to the criminal activity, so-called data subject categorization, after 6 months from the reception of these data sets, was not compliant with the regulation, with the Europol regulation. This important safeguard served as the limit to the risk to the EU citizens and other individuals whose data were processed in Europol databases. For example, for those who are being wrongly linked with the criminal activities across the EU, with all potential damage to their private and professional lives that this entails. Therefore, on the 3rd of January this year, the EDPS notified Europol of an order to delete such data. The European Data Protection Supervisor has also granted additional time to deal with the backlog of the data sets, namely 12 months, concerning the data lacking the subject categorization and which are received before. This is not the new interpretation. That's the interpretation we were standing for the whole time. And that was also, I believe, the reason for which we've been approached in April 2019 by the Europol director. The EDPS intends closely monitor the implementation of the order, starting from the assessment of the report that Europol needs to provide and which the executive director of Europol was talking about. With upcoming regulation, the new type of processing will be largely authorized without any restriction. That presents a substantial shift in Europol's role as to support the member states. Europol is now not limited anymore to processing the data about the persons with established links to the criminal activity, but there is a possibility to extend it to any data which is collected in a broad context of any criminal investigation by any member state. In other words, data of the persons with no established link to the criminal activity will now, under the new version of the regulation, be processed the same way as the data of the suspects of the convicts, which makes the supervision largely pointless, as there will be no limitation as to what categories of the data Europol can process, under which conditions, and probably even on how long. This shift is taking place with no accompanying structural set of safeguards, making Europol to a large extent no man's land. And I fully believe in the goodwill and in good organization which exists in Europol, but we have to say it openly that creating the new possibilities of the activities for Europol, strengthening the role of the agency, has to go hand in hand with the changes in the supervision and enhancing the supervisory activities. As the next point of the remarks, I would like to consider what EDPS has observed in the course of the supervisory activities this year, and that increase the unrestrained processing of the large data sets will give the rise to the use of the artificial intelligence by Europol. In recent years, some law enforcement authorities have been providing Europol with data sets so big that Europol is often not in a position to efficiently link the persons contained into these data sets to criminal activities, not only on the basis of the analyst manual assessment. As a result, in 2020, Europol started developing the machine learning tool to help the processing of this large amount of data. On 5th of March 2021, EDPS provided guidance to Europol regarding development and use of the machine learning tools, and EDPS put emphasis on the need to identify the risk to the fundamental rights and freedoms. The development and use of such tools was also one of the topics of the annual Europol inspection in September 2021, the first inspection after the lockdowns. Thanks to this supervisory activities, Europol now putting in place the policies and the procedures to assess the risk posed by the artificial intelligence in the operational analysis. So I have to say that the answer from Europol to the guidance by EDPS was very positive, and the strong team existing there started to prepare the analysis which are expected by the law at the moment. Let me underline that the EDPS will continue to monitor the use of the AI by Europol. This also have an impact to the effectiveness of the data subject access rights, which I have to use some time to discuss about. The increase in processing of the large data sets, as now to be allowed under the revised Europol regulation, will lead to increased quantities of unstructured personal data, including on persons which have no links to crimes. This renders the exercise of the data subject rights both critical and more complex. It will require more work inside Europol, but it also gives the barriers to the simple knowledge of the person that the data reached the agency. On 13th of December 2021, EDPS issued an opinion in which we retained that no Europol system can be a priori excluded from a search when assessing data subject access requests. However, taking into account that some of the systems may be particularly complicated and burdensome to search because of the format and the unstructured nature of the data, the EDPS requested Europol to implement appropriate measures to facilitate more efficient search and retrieval of this data, and make sure that the data subject access rights can be properly reacted upon. I can imagine that these are not all the things which you might be interested in the work of the EDPS as the current regulator which has to assure the compliance with the existing regulation. I'm ready to answer the questions in the later part of this meeting.
Je vous remercie.
Thank you very, very much for that. Now, I should like to wish a warm welcome to Mr. Bonnet and congratulate him on behalf of one and all for your recent election as head of the board of Europol. Over to you, sir.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman, Excellencies, parliamentarians, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, it's with great pleasure that I take the floor here before you for the first time as the management board's head. Remember, this is an 18-month mandate that I have. So it's my first time here in the Troika, and it's a very rich mandate when it comes to having to deal with the rollout of the new mandate. So we're delighted to come at you live from this symbolic point here in Palace. I also wanted to acknowledge the hard work of my co-chairs who had invited me to talk about the post-October 2021 activities of the Management Board. And so, as we and I will be referring it to this scrutiny group as the JPSG. Now, remember that we had several different new capacities for action that have been mandated for the body. First of all, the Police Cooperation Code. There will be a new framework for police cooperation, and this will mean that it's going to be able to facilitate the takedown of content online and will bolster the security framework for Europe. Furthermore, there is a new anti-money laundering facilitation put into place with a closer cooperation among the different bodies concerned, and particularly at the national level between the police services specialized in anti-money laundering and corruption and the finance cells or units. I, as a representative of the management board, am able to express my satisfaction with the way that the agreement has been negotiated, and we're looking forward to seeing it enter into force in June. In the October 2021 meeting, the Management Board examined all of the different arguments put forward by way of response by Europol concerning the mass data sets. In December, the Management Board noted with the satisfaction the progress made on the action plan so as to respond to the recommendations thereupon. Following the EDPS decision in January of this year, I took the initiative convening an extraordinary meeting of the board so as to look at the operational consequences of that decision, as well as the potential impact on the way that we operate. The new data set processing mechanisms are going to mean that police mechanisms are going to be better positioned when it comes to investigating potential crimes and hopefully will be more agile in the work that they do thereupon. As we've just heard from the Executive Director, I think this really does reflect the work done by the Management Board, particularly as concerns some of the issues raised by the JPSG. I also want to take this opportunity to respond to the European Data Protection Supervisor, even though we're not in the same room today, because I'm pretty sure that the work that we're doing on the data set processing is going to be perfectly compatible with the direction in which you are focused. As concerns data protection, the last ordinary meeting of the Management Board undertook a decision concerning Europol's organization and its external relations. In the December meeting, the board met with two JPSG representatives, and then we adopted the 2022 to 2024 strategic document, as you heard a moment ago. Moreover, the Management Board adopted the 2022 budget. In December, the board also discussed the first draft of the upcoming multi-year programmatic document as of 2023, and at the end of January, we were able to combine this with the forecasts of a financial nature for 2023. Finally, as concerns the under Article 12 of the ROP of Europol, we were able to look at the budget lines allocated there too. Finally, we are looking forward to the discussion on the AI and the threats and opportunities that this poses. The increased flow of data sets, and the nature of the criminal spheres in Europe and beyond, all of these different factors aligned with minutes will all mean that Europol is under more pressure and there are more expectations of it. We will continue to work and to manage this flow and also ensure full compliance with the existing regulations. Since 2018, with the JPSG, with the Management Board adopted the Article 14 provisions concerning this compliance. We have in this regard had our 13 ordinary meetings, which are held twice yearly, except in 2020 because of the COVID when it was postponed. And we are doing so. And also, as of June last year, we've had two meetings: one for the for national parliaments and one for the European Parliament, so as to ensure that we are doing our utmost to communicate on our activities. Para 4 of the new Article 14 of the new regulation actually deals with this very issue, and I think attests to the positive experiences that have been gained thus far. In cooperation between the Management Board and the GPSG, this is going to be even more important moving forward. Because on the one hand, it strengthens Europol's role, but it also strengthens the scrutiny group's actions thereupon. Dear members of the GPSG, this upcoming period is going to be very, very intense, and I'm looking forward to giving you an update at the next meeting on our activities. Also, we're looking forward to having two members of the JPSG coming to our Management Board under the aegis of the French presidency of the EU. And we will be discussing various different issues that are to be defined in the upcoming weeks. Thank you. I want to thank you for the members of the Troika for all of their information, and thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Bonnet. Now, just to finish off with this, I should like to invite Mr. Pellegrini, who is coming to the end of his mandate as chairman of the Europol Cooperation Board. Thank you very, very much for the high quality of your work. And I know that it's always too brief, but I'm just going to ask you to give us a summary of all of the work that you've been doing in the Cooperation Board. Thank you.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Sorry, the sound quality is not good enough for us to interpret yet.
La supervision.
On vous entend extrêmement mal. Ça, il y a beaucoup.
Sorry, we can't hear the speaker. Sadly, there's too much interference.
Je vous entends très bien. Je vérifie. Je sais pas le plan. C'est mieux.
Allez-y.
Oui, donc je disais que la supervision effective et indépendante des traitements de données à caractère personnel par Europol est un élément clé pour l'accomplissement des missions de l'agence, mais aussi pour une coopération policière.
Unfortunately, the sound quality is not good enough for interpretation. It's cutting out every couple of words.
Le rôle et les missions des autorités de protection des données doivent pouvoir s'accomplir pleinement et leurs décisions doivent être respectées, y compris lors de l'évolution du cadre juridique applicable aux activités d'Europol. Je m'adresse à vous aujourd'hui pour la dernière fois en tant que président du comité de coopération d'Europol, le comité qui réunit les autorités nationales de protection des données et les contrôleurs européens, afin d'assurer une supervision coordonnée des traitements de données à caractère personnel mis en œuvre par Europol. La révision du règlement Europol conduit en effet à ce que cette supervision coordonnée s'effectue désormais au sein du comité européen de la protection des données, du European Data Protection Board. Ce changement de cadre permettra d'inscrire nos travaux en abordant de façon cohérente les thématiques connexes à d'autres agences dont la supervision coordonnée s'effectue déjà au sein du comité européen, tels qu'Eurojust ou le parquet européen. J'y vois donc un bénéfice significatif pour la coopération effective entre autorités de protection des données afin d'assurer la pleine cohérence de nos actions et positions. Pour terminer ce court propos devant vous, je souhaite également revenir sur la question des grands ensembles de données, déjà évoqués par le contrôleur européen. Nous partageons ces inquiétudes quant aux difficultés et limites induites par la révision du règlement Europol, le contrôle par les autres pour les droits des gens. La récente décision du contrôleur prononcée à l'encontre d'Europol, et nous devons certainement porter une plus grande attention à la constitution de ces grands ensembles de données, qui résultent principalement de la transmission de ces données par les autorités nationales compétentes. Les autorités de protection des données sont particulièrement attentives à ces problématiques et ont d'ores et déjà engagé une réflexion commune sur les mesures visant à assurer la conformité de ces transferts de données depuis les autorités nationales compétentes vers Europol, avec l'inscription d'une thématique dédiée aux big données, big data, au programme de travail du comité de coopération d'Europol pour les années 2021 à 2023. Cette thématique prioritaire, tout comme l'ensemble de ce programme de travail pour les 2 années à venir, seront transmis au comité européen qui assurera désormais la mission de supervision coordonnée des traitements de données à caractère personnel mis en œuvre par Europol. Je souhaite que les échanges fructueux que nous avons pu avoir avec notre groupe de contrôle parlementaire conjoint au cours de ces 5 dernières années puissent se poursuivre de la même façon avec le comité européen, à qui j'adresse tous mes vœux de bon travail. Je vous remercie pour votre attention et vous souhaite bonne continuation dans vos travaux.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Pellegrini.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pellegrini. With that concludes our preliminary comments. Now, before we move on to take the questions of parliamentarians, I would like to give the floor, first of all, to Mr. López Aguilar. Are you with us, Mr. López Aguilar? Thank you very much, Madame Brand-Pivet. Good morning to everyone.
Giving me the chance just upon arrival and on board on this joint exercise of our joint parliamentary scrutiny group on Europol. Of course, my regards to Director De Bol and EDBS Mr. Vivorovsky, as to the rest of the panelists that we've heard today, including Jérôme Bonnet, François Pellegrini. Just, I would take simply the chance to remind you that we accomplished the completion of the legislative procedure leading to the adoption of the revisions of Europol mandate, the new regulation, which is now finally completed under French presidency. So congratulations for that. You're all aware that according to this new enhanced mandate for Europol, there have been a number of significant changes as to the capabilities of the agency, including the cooperation with private parties and third countries, data protection and fundamental rights provision applicable to Europol. And I would also bring some attention to the point concerning precisely the works of our GPSG, as 2 GPSG representatives will be invited as observers to at least 2 meetings of Europol Management Board, building on the change to our rules of procedure and practices we have already made with Europol Management Board throughout the recent years. Reporting obligations for Europol regarding the GPSG are also to be strengthened, as where the Europol Management Board does not take into account the GPSG's opinion on the multi-annual programming document. The new mandate, in addition, foresees for the establishment of a consultative forum on fundamental rights, which is also, as you are all aware, a regular concern for the European Parliament, especially for the LIBE committee, which I chair. Fundamental rights in every agency are always essential in the works and the delivery of every agency while fulfilling its duties. That consultative forum is to be established by the GPSG to assist by providing independent advice in fundamental rights matters upon request. And finally, the GPSG and the Executive Director may consult the consultative forum in any matter related to fundamental rights. It'll be for the GPSG to decide on the composition of the consultative forum and its working methods. I thank you for your attention. Let's carry on with the exercise. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. So we now have a number of people asking for the floor. I'm going to take a group of 5 questions at a time. 14 questions have been raised, but if others would like to actually add their names to the list, they'd be very welcome to do so. The first question is from Mr. Francisco Javier Zazalej Nieto. I do apologize if I mispronounce some names. Feel free to actually do the same with my name, but you have the floor.
Alors, normalement, la première prise de parole était...
So I was giving the floor, first of all, to Mr. Zazaleros Nieto from the European Parliament, from the EPP group. Are you with us?
Sí, espero que estoy...
Yes, I think I'm with you. Yes. I think you can hear me now. Yes, we can hear you. Great. Well, of course, I would like to thank you for giving me the floor, but more than a question, I just wanted to actually take the floor as rapporteur for the new regulation on Europol, which gives you a strengthened mandate. I think that this is a very important step. The fact that Parliament, as a co-legislator, along with the Council in this case, under the French presidency, and the Commission, has actually shown our confidence in Europol, and we've actually given more responsibility to Europol by giving you a reinforced mandate. And we also have, through this new mandate, we have established a legal basis to ensure that Europol is able to act in this new digital environment in which we find ourselves today. Thirdly, the new mandate also establishes a new model for governance. This is particularly important for this particular group. The Parliament has got a stronger group, a stronger role in governing carrying out a democratic scrutiny of the agency, and also the participation of the European Parliament and national parliaments in this particular forum is very important. This is a unique role that we play, and our role is being strengthened through the new mandate. So, with the new challenges that Europol has got to face, we have to ensure that we are able to better our capacity to react and to help member states in the fight against crime. And so the new instruments that we have now provided for Europol is going to enable them to act within safeguards. So there's going to be a role for data protection in the new mandate. We have resolved a number of problems, and Europol is now going to be able to free itself of some of the difficulties it had from its very inception. So we have a new climate now for cooperating with goodwill between the institutions. And I think that we can be very pleased with the work that's been done by the Parliament and others. We feel that it's very important also that we have given new impetus to this under the French presidency. We've also seen that the past presidencies have also been very active here. In particular, I refer to the Slovene presidency, where we made a lot of progress. We now have an agency for which the fight against crime is now much more effective. They're able now to react to the new demands of the digital world, the new profiles of criminals, and we're seeing now an added value for any investigation carried out at European level. Investigations which can actually be dealing with very complicated data sets as well. And so we are very pleased to see that the European Parliament has been able to assume its responsibility in passing this mandate, and we are hoping now that we will see a new efficiency within the management of Europol and the efficiency of the new tools that have been provided to Europol through the new mandate. Thank you.
Merci à vous.
Thank you. Let me give the floor to Mr. Dimitriou from the Cyprian Parliament.
Yes, good morning. Firstly, I would like to express my gratitude to the Europol support to Cyprus law enforcement authorities. Additionally to the already existing cooperation, as you may know, a memorandum of understanding on migration management has been signed a few days ago, and Europol will also contribute further in this regard. Your contribution is much appreciated. Regarding the negotiations on the proposed revision to the Europol regulation, we welcome the provisional agreement. However, we are concerned about the opinion of the European Data Protection Supervisor that Europol has been unlawfully holding a large amount of information. This unprecedented finding from the EDPS is very worrying and leads to the question on how we come to this finding, as we were given assurances as the opposite in the past. Do you think there is an inherent contradiction between Europol's operational needs for data retention and its duties with regards to data protection and privacy? Furthermore, how does the new regulation address these concerns? How can they be overcome without compromising Europol's analytical capabilities? Additionally, I would like to express satisfaction concerning the increased role for the JPSG as provided in the provisional agreement. However, I wish to be further informed on the mandate of the post of the Fundamental Rights Officer, on the cooperation between this new official and the European Data Protection Supervisor, and on the possibility the JPSG can hear in the future from the Fundamental Rights Officer. Moreover, I would like to ask how Europol sees its own role with regard to machine learning and artificial intelligence in policing. In the current legislative framework, as envisaged in the new regulation sufficient, what new capacities for Europol will be required? Could you elaborate a bit further on the AIDA project? Thank you very much.
Je vous remercie.
Thank you. I will now give the floor to Mr. Patrick Breyer from the European Parliament.
Donc,
Good morning, can you hear me well? Excellent. Thank you, Chair. Now, my first question concerns the alarming Europol reform, and it goes to Mr. Wiworowski. You explained the permission for bulk data storage, even on non-suspects, and the complete lack of safeguards in this reform. And I understand that the bulk data stored by Europol includes PNR data, private communications data, even communications content, and there is very clear case law that governs the storage and processing of this data. So my question to you is, the new mandate being as it is, do you think that the principle of proportionality nonetheless requires certain limits on the storage period or data handling, which by way of interpretation will have to be read into the legislative text to ensure compliance with the principle of proportionality? And my question to Mrs. de Boll concerns the data subject rights. So the only way for me to correct false data or to challenge unlawfully stored data is to know that this data is in possession of Europol. And so my question is, if I request access to data stored by Europol on myself, will you find me or my mobile phone number or my identifiers in unstructured bulk data? So how do you handle incoming requests to make sure that you identify all personal data on a person? Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. We now have a question from Mr. Sebastian Fiedler from the Bundestag. Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for the opportunity. I do want to apologize, first of all, because I'm going to be thanking you for the report, but at the same time, I also wanted to take the floor today to actually raise a question or two. Given the present situation, I wanted to find out more about the role of Europol linked to the present measures that are being taken, given the present war in the Ukraine from yesterday. This is very important today because yesterday we talked about task force at European level, and I'm not quite sure exactly whether Europol has a role to play in all of this. But my particular interest and my question really is directed in that direction. I want to know what role Europol could actually be playing in this very topical situation. It's a question of strategic importance because the question as to whether or not sanctions are going to be implemented, sanctions which would actually target money laundering or suspect money from oligarchs from the circle around Vladimir Putin. What added value can Europol afford here in an analytical point of view? And there's, of course, the work being done on suspect transactions that have been carried out. There's the network of asset recovery offices, and which also looks at financing coming from organized crime and other suspect regimes. The sanctions, of course, are following other legal frameworks. So I wanted to know whether Europol can actually intervene in any way to use its abilities or its capacity in this area? And also, is the legal basis correct as such that such questions, when they are raised about sanctions or international cooperation or international detection of such financing, do we have the right legal instrument for Europol? What does the director feel about this, or would we need to have a future discussion on the legal basis at some point? Thank you.
Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much. And the final question from this round of questions is from Madam Claire Daly from the European Parliament.
Bon, elle n'est pas avec.
Oh, she's not with us. She's not connected. So perhaps I can move on then to have a first set of responses. Many of the questions were actually addressed to the European Data Protection Director, and I'll ask him to respond first before turning to the Director and the Coordination Board. Mr. First of all, the Coordinator of Data Protection, please.
Okay. Thank you very much for the questions. Thank you for the comments that were done also to the activities, the supervisory activities, and to the new legal framework. Let me start with an answer to the question by Mr. Dimitrios. I would like to stress again, we have never used in any of our decisions the statement that the data was unlawfully processed by Europol by purpose. We said about the problem of interpretation of the regulation and the structural problem that Europol has. We didn't accuse Europol of a perpetual action against the regulation as it is. The role of the European Data Protection Supervisor is to make the compliance of the regulation acting, and we are not in the position to say that Europol is incompliant because of its decision, so that there was a decision to perpetually go into this direction. As it was presented by Europol, as it was presented by DPS several times, we have the problem of the challenge of the big amount of data. And unfortunately, I'm afraid that the proposals to go further, which are in the regulation, in the recast of the regulation, may not meet the requirements of the European treaties. That's because when we decide that we want to have the new role for the agency, we should not limit the possibility of having an oversight on what is going on there. I would strongly say again, this is not EDPS who decide about the political choices of the European Union. If Europe decides to have a strong agency that has a reinforced role, and this role is particularly directed to the international cooperation, to the cross-border crimes, and to make the cross-border activities, then we should start to think about the cross-border answers to this enhanced possibilities of the agency. For example, if we have the prior check of the activities that are done by the police forces or the law enforcement authorities on the national level, I'm not sure if the persons doing the prior check, according to the national law, are taking into consideration the fact that the data which is collected in the operational activity will be then transferred to the international agency, European agency, and mixed and matched with the data from the other countries. Then probably we have to start to think about such a prior check on the European level, and there is no discussion like that even at the moment in Europe. I'm very happy of the position of the Fundamental Rights Officer, and we are happy to cooperate with the Fundamental Rights Officer. We also want to stress the very practical and helpful and efficient cooperation with the data protection unit inside Europol. But I also would like to stress that we are starting to lack external control over what's going on in the agency. So I'm not accusing the agency of the bad faith, but the legal ground that we create do not help them to present their activities outside. And the added value of the work which is done on the European level is unquestionable. There is no fight against any kind of cybercrime, any kind of organizational crime without this work which is done right now by Europol. If we decide to make the mandate stronger, however, we should also think if the requirements which exist in the constitutions of the member states and in the treaties are met with the system that consists of permanent exceptions. Thank you very much.
Merci.
Thank you very much, Supervisor. I should give the floor now to the Director for the questions that concern her before moving on. You have the floor, Madam.
Thank you for giving me the floor. Mr. Dimitriou, thank you for your recognition of the report, of the support we give to Cyprus. And we will continue with our support related to migration and keep our guest officers there as long as you want. Related to the data protection issue, I think Mr. Wierowski, the data protection supervisor, was clear. And he also mentioned this in the Libe committee, that to quote, I am happy to say that we haven't used so far the notion of illegal processing done by purpose by Europol. We have never said anything like that. We have never said that by purpose Europol was processing this data. We are talking about the retention of the data which is stored by Europol. That is what the decision is all about. So, and we are now implementing the decision of the EDPS of the 3rd of January, and we will report to the EDPS in the beginning of April of the implementation related to the decision. Then related to your question of the fundamental rights officer and the AI. And how do we see the role of the fundamental rights officer in the research and innovation projects? We are very happy with the decision of having a fundamental rights officer because it's all about fundamental rights at Europol, and we see it as a positive development in our revised legal framework. If we take the cooperation with the Fundamental Rights Agency that we establish now, and we have an understanding and an agreement with the Fundamental Rights Agency at the moment in the context of the AP4AI projects, as a reference, we can only vouch for the added value of having the fundamental rights perspective on board. And it is a very positive synergy combining the needs of the law enforcement with compliance with fundamental rights. The experience suggests indeed that it will be a benefit for an active advisory role in-house of the new fundamental rights officer, and it will complement the role of the data protection officer. Mr. Breyer, related to your questions on the data subject access request, Of course, we as Europol do not comment in public about details of individual data subject access requests. I can confirm that Europol follows the rules and in some cases has been discussed in the media. Of course, we looked at this information in the media. In some cases, it was mentioned that Europol still holds data. In cases of data subjects in the mentioned case, it was not correct. We receive 500 data subject access requests a year, with around 10% of these data subject requests generating hits where we hold information, and in 2% of all the cases we refuse access to the data we hold because it is established with the national authorities that access may not be given. And this is based on the legal provisions in our regulation, Article 36. Mr. Fiedler, thank you for your questions about the crisis in Ukraine. We can support already the member states and the Ukrainian authorities on different levels because we have an operational agreement in place with Ukraine, and we have a liaison officer from Ukraine here in the offices. The aim from the Ukrainian authorities was to have a second Ukrainian liaison officer, but we will have to see if they will send somebody else. We also have a Siena connection with the Ukrainian law enforcement authorities, but we now did foresee an end-to-end possibility for communication between the Ukrainian law enforcement authorities and Europol, not to have the risk to infect the whole connection of the Siena connection. We also do this together with Interpol. So Interpol and Europol, we take the same measures, mostly the same measures to maintain the cooperation and the communication with the Ukrainian authorities. We support Ukraine and Poland specifically now with the Migrant Smuggling Center, but I must say that we did not see smuggling incidents during the weekend happening. It was an orderly manner that happened at the cross-border points. We saw that during the weekend almost 200,000 Ukrainians entered the EU. We have the Joint Liaison Task Force on Migrant Smuggling active. So that is the specialists in migrant smuggling who are at Europol. They gather and they come together to evaluate the situation and to see if the Ukrainian authorities or other member states need to be supported. The EPCR meeting is taking place today on the situation on Ukraine upon request of the Justice and Home Affairs Council on Sunday. We already supported the Ukrainian authorities from counterterrorism perspective and a cybercrime perspective. Because Ukraine requested us to address to Telegram because they wanted to block a number of Telegram's channels involved in pro-Russian disinformation campaigns and fake news. We facilitated and Telegram reported that they took down the referred channels. But of course, we cannot give too much information on ongoing investigations. We also did put in place the EU Law Enforcement Emergency Response Protocol for Cyber Crisis endorsed by the Council in 2018. And we are in close contact with the other EU institutions, the bodies and the agencies as a member of this response protocol mechanism against the large-scale attacks that might occur. We also have the Financial Crime Center, and that is the aim of the center is also to support investigations related to financial and economic crime if requested by member states.
Thank you very much. And I will now give the floor to President Boni. Thank you, Chairman. I'll keep it short because I think Catherine has already covered most of the questions raised as regards the border management role. We're there to represent the states and the law enforcement units of the member states. In Europol, of course, this change in the rules as regards the processing of mass data has come about because of the very comportment behavior of terrorist and criminal organizations. There's a real need here for us to update the legal setup over the coming years as well, and to do it as quickly as possible. Let me also say that most of the data, in fact, all of the data that Europol has come from judicial proceedings, in other words, through the judges, through the courts. So there's a twofold check that's carried out. And also, I should say that saying that Europol has not committed anything illegal is a very important statement, a very important fact. And the text of the regulations that have been adopted as a result of political consensus strengthen the role of the supervisor, the EDPS, at each step in the processing of the mass data. So we're talking about adapting to the operational requirements at the request of the states, and in parallel, stepping up the supervisory capability. Thank you very much for these clarifications. Claire Daly from the European Parliament has the floor.
Alors, on ne vous entend.
I'm afraid, dear colleague, that we cannot hear you. Could you perhaps try again?
She's here in the room. She should be heard.
Oui.
The interpreters are interpreting her, actually.
We're doing our best here.
Voilà. Ça me paraît être un minimum. Ou alors... Là, c'est bon, on vous entend, on vous entend.
You hear me now?
Oui, tout à fait. Allez-y.
Oh, great. I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened there with everybody. So look, I'll start again, and thank you so much to the Secretariat for organising the meeting. It is a really important time, clearly, for Europol in terms of its future powers. It's going to have an impact on our communities, on our citizens, and on our fundamental rights. And we're very glad that the Parliament did succeed in bringing in, as part of the trilogue, some key amendments in terms of the safeguarding of our rights, which have been mentioned already this morning. But I suppose the key point for us is that it doesn't redeem our ultimate really deep disappointment and concern over the extension of Europol's mandate to process large amounts of uncategorized data for large periods of time, which it doesn't matter what way you dress it up, it does undermine the EU's data protection laws and the EU Charter, and it's obviously been criticised and concerns expressed by multiple digital rights and civil liberties watchdogs. But I know the executive director says she doesn't like to talk about data subject access requests, and that's fair enough, but it does get to the heart of some of these concerns. And I'd just like to raise one case of a person whose life was turned upside down due to the retention of his data on a Europol watch list. And this is Frank van der Linde, a Dutch climate and anti-racist activist who had taken legal action against the Dutch police because they had his name on a left-wing extremist database. So when he took his legal action, he found out then completely surprised him that he was on the Europol list also. Now, when he went to contact Europol afterwards, the answer given to them was, well, then you're not entitled to access that information. Now, based on what the executive director said to an earlier question, I believe that the arrangement then is it goes back to the Dutch police. But do you not see the irony in that he was on that list probably because he had taken illegal action against the Dutch police, and then the only remedy for him is that, oh, you're getting no access to your file, it's going back to the... So I really like to know from the executive director, how are people like that, their data going to be, which has wrongly been put on the alert, how is that going to be removed when they've no access to their own files? In that sense, who is ensuring false alerts aren't ruining people's lives and being permanently stored? And I note and heard very clearly the comments of the data protection supervisor warning that the expansion of the data sets is going to increase the risk of categories of really innocent people having their data, I suppose, processed in the way in which a suspect would be as a result of some of the changes, and warning of the limits to his role in this. So I'm wondering, given that there are questions out there and given that the data protection supervisor hasn't got the power to monitor them, who do we think is going to do this? Thanks a million.
Merci.
Thank you very much, dear colleague. Mr. Imre Veske has the floor from the Assembly, the National Assembly.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, distinguished fellow members of Parliament. I'd like to cordially welcome every member, every participant of this session on behalf of the Justice Affairs Commission of the Hungarian National Assembly. We in Hungary, we support the reinforcement of the Europol mandate, especially due to the continuously changing circumstances, new modus operandi of criminals, and trends, technical development. The agreement of the Council and the European Parliament, I believe, will strengthen the organization and its operational concept. It will also allow the agency to perform its mission at the highest levels in order to support member state law enforcement. With respect to the decision of the EDPS from January, we consider it of outstanding significance that the Europol should be able to meet the data protection challenges stemming from managing such large data sets. However, we also consider it equally important that the agency should be capable on the short term also to provide high-level analytic support to law enforcement agencies of the member states. We greatly value the Europol's efforts to enhance its capacities regarding the strengthening and the supporting of cooperation of member states. We are paying attention to all the innovative solutions, and we are using them in order to be more effective. We are using the advantages offered by the Cirrus platform, and we are following with great interest the development of the technical solution aimed at assisting the implementation of the directive on standing up to the spreading of online terrorist content. We also welcome the possibility of agreement with third countries that could provide for the exchange of personal information. Hungary actively participates in the Europol Western Balkans Working Group, and we have been supporting the border surveillance activities of these countries of the Western Balkans during the past year. I have one single question for the end, and this has to do with the utilization of AI. What do you think? What kind of areas could be included for the possible application of AI in the everyday activities of Europol? We thank you for your work at the agency, and we trust in our successful cooperation in the future. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Ralf Seekatz from the European Parliament. Thank you very much, Chairman. First of all, I'm delighted to hear that Ukraine is also being dealt with at this level, and that we're trying to give as much support as possible. I think that is a very important signal that we have to send out in these difficult times. Question to Mr. Boll as regards money laundering. Europol has had tremendous success with Operation 7. I think that over 18,000 identifications came about. And with this new money laundering authority, we're talking about the importance of having something that creates real added value. It's going to be important to have a functional cooperation with different bodies together with Europol, and it's important that we have a clear indication of the competences and that everything is defined clearly so as to avoid any duplication of work. So my question is the following. What are the requirements that the Europol has vis-à-vis this new authority, and what sort of potential problems might there be? And then there's another area of interest to me, the question as to whether in verifying the European development plan, whether there's any role played by Europol there. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, mon cher collègue.
Thank you very much, colleague. I'm going to give the floor now to Mr. Cohen-Metsu, who's from the Belgian Chamber of Representatives.
I thank you, Ms. Chair. I have three topics which I would like to emphasize or highlight. First one is on the budget. Europol is financed from the EU budget. Resources have always been on topic, a topic of debate in these JPSG meetings. We need to ensure that Europol gets adequate and sufficient resources in order for the agency to be able to perform according to our expectations. Over the past few years, we have observed very limited growth in staff, taking into account the increasing requests of services from member states to Europol, as well as the revised legal regime. Is Europol equipped with sufficient resources to provide the expected operational support to member states, is the question. And besides the revised mandate, are there any other legislative initiatives whose implementation may require additional resources? Then following up with a question for someone who was involved in the trilogues, can I ask if the trilogues on the revision of the mandate on Europol have also evolved around this issue of the budget? What was decided on this matter? What challenges were brought up? Are there any plans to increase the budget of the agency? If yes, at which percentage of increase in budget are we looking? Will this be sufficient to cover the new or the extended actually tasks and responsibilities of the agency? Then second topic, fundamental rights officers, already emphasized by other speakers and colleagues. Last JPSG meeting, following the Commission proposal on the revision of the Europol mandate, we talked about introduction of fundamental rights officers into the agency. We also talked about what their relation would be to the data protection officers already embedded in the agency. Today, we know that the Council and Parliament have already concluded a provisional agreement on the revision of the Europol mandate. In light of this provisional agreement, I would like to ask how the function of fundamental rights officers are now defined in the revision of the mandate and how they will relate to the data protection officers. Maybe Ms. De Bolle can give us some more details. And then my last topic, the drug-related activity. So to finish, I would like to ask the director for a state of play of Europol's activities in drug-related activities. How is the cooperation going in this specific matter between Belgian law enforcement authorities and Europol? Which actions have been taken the last few months? Are there any projects or actions foreseen in the near future? Those are my specific questions, Ms. Chair.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. I'll take one more question for the second round, and it's Madame Saskia Brickman from the European Parliament.
Bonjour, chers collègues. Merci.
Good morning, colleagues, and thank you for this interesting discussion. I think it's a very important moment because indeed we have reached a provisionally agreement on the Europol mandate. This is looking at the extension. This looks at the extension of the agency's missions and it gives it a lot of prerogative. So for my group, we feel that we haven't actually got enough independent checking or surveillance of the agency. We feel that the agency should actually be more monitored. Indeed, there is a mandate now where we have someone responsible for fundamental rights and protecting fundamental rights. But my group would like to see more transparent cooperation with the Parliamentary Scrutiny Group. And indeed, we also feel that we need to. They've set up a consultative forum, and it's up to us to actually install this forum. And we have to work closely with Madame Dubola and the other members of the team to ensure that this is a completely transparent forum with exchange of information, which would enable us. We MEPs, or members of parliament, to actually carry out our scrutiny role. It's very important, I believe, as well, that we do this to work closely with third parties and private parties as well. We see a development of of artificial intelligence being used in the in Europol, and also the EDPS also mentioned this as well. He said that there are alerts being sent out to the EDPS as far as data protection is concerned. So that's all I want to say. As far as I know, the Article 74A was introduced by the French presidency during the trilogue, and I believe that has been actually quashed by your services, I believe, carrying out trying to introduce a number of changes, and I think that it should be retroactively reintroduced. I wonder whether you have a legal position on this problem, the problem of Article 74A. We believe that it's very important that we are able to continue to work to support independent surveillance on the agencies of the European Union, and in particular the activities of Europol right now, because the citizens as well demand more information and more transparency. And on that point, I would like to just pick up again on a question that I have from Madame Dubol. We have the possibility of sending in questions as members of the parliaments, European parliaments or the national parliaments, but sadly, I must say that sometimes the responses that we get from Europol are too lacking in detail. It doesn't really enable us to actually carry out our scrutiny work correctly. So my question to you, Madame de Boll, is whether you would commit to yourself to ensuring that we as supervisors are able to actually do our job by providing us with detailed responses to our questions. I think that is essential if we want to make sure that there is full confidence on both sides of the debate, ensuring that we have greater transparency in the work that's being carried out by Europol. So we need to make sure that there is independence and impartiality in their work, and that's part of your code of conduct. And so I also asked a question about the conference on cybercrime. I don't know who participated in that. I got no full response about who was participating in that, and I would think it's important that you have at least access to the attendance list for bodies like our own, that we should be able to get full responses when we ask questions like this, so that we're able to see whether a private company was present at that event or not. So we would like to have more transparency. Thank you. Thank you. As we are a little bit tight in our time, I'd like to continue with the questions first, and then we will have responses from the three speakers to a larger set of questions. Let me give the floor now to Mr. Korzepa, who is from the Polish National Assembly.
Hello, bonjour. Je vous remercie.
Hello, I would like to thank you for holding this debate today, and I also wanted to say that we are very pleased to see you reacting so quickly to the situation in Ukraine. We feel that this sign of solidarity with the inhabitants of Ukraine is very important for all of us. And then, To contribute to this debate, I would like to make two comments. One is that Poland feels that it's very positive to see that Europol is being supported, and that we are providing for new elements in the mandate of the Europol because of the multidisciplinary development now of criminality, and we are seeing that it's going to be able to provide a more multidimensional safety net for the European Union. At the same time, we feel it's important that we have a proper role for we have a proper departmentalization of the responsibilities of Europol. Given that we have new challenges with digitalization, I think it's very important as well that we're able to ensure that Europol is able to react to and properly combat any organized crime developed through digitalization, and we feel it's important also that we've changed the mandate for Europol, which enables us to deal with essential questions such as how we process data using big data, making sure that we're able to provide support to investigations that are up and running at an international level. This is very important. Thank you. Thank you. And now for Lithuania, Mr. Surplis.
Alors, si Monsieur Surplis...
Well, if Mr. Surplis is not available, let me move on to give the floor to Mr. Alexander van Hattem from the Netherlands.
Voorzitter, can I ask the question in Dutch? Oké, dank voorzitter. Ik heb een paar korte vragen. Allereerst, er werd net een toelichting gegeven over de samenwerking met Oekraïne. Strategisch.
We do not have Dutch interpretation today.
Interprète en néerlandais aujourd'hui. Est-ce que nous avons des interprètes?
Sorry, we don't have interpretation from Dutch today. We only have interpretation in English, German, and Spanish. Or you can ask the question in English.
Ça sera parfait. Merci beaucoup.
Ja. Er was een point about the situation in Ukraine. I also saw on the website of Europol there is a strategic agreement on cooperation with Russia since the 6th of November 2003. Is there still any cooperation with Russia, between Europol and Russia? And does the current situation affect investigations or other actions by Europol? My next question is about the big data problem. There was referred to a person from the Netherlands. I don't know exactly the case, but if there is a serious problem with this person, then the Dutch justice has to investigate it. But without this point, in what in what kind of manner is the Dutch involved in delivering such big data sets, and on what legal base? That's not very clear for me. The third point is the threat of jihadi terrorism, the undiminished threats, as Mr. Bolle said. How is Europol handling this at the moment? Is it just investigation, or is Europol also proactive searching for jihadi terrorism in, by example, big data sets? Can there be given a little more explanation about it? That's it, Chair.
Je vous remercie.
Thank you. And now for the Bundesrat, we have Mr. Boris Pistorius. Thank you. Well, also, I would like to wish you all a very good morning from Hanover. I just wanted to add on to what my colleague, Mr. Phelim, raised from the German Parliament. I think he maybe misunderstood this. It wasn't a question of cooperating with the Ukrainian police services, but whether the existing framework of Europol enables us to carry out controls or asset recovery officers are able to actually be used to implement sanctions, and whether our legislation is sufficient for that, if this has already happened, if it's planned, and if not, to what extent we actually have thought about changing the legal framework in that area, or are there other possibilities that we could seek? Because I believe that that is plays a key role in trying to ensure that our sanctions against the Russian money launderers are successful.
Je vous remercie.
Thank you. Let me move on to Madame Bana Tibor from the Hungarian National Assembly.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, dear colleagues. In my October contribution, I addressed the issue of cyberbullying and tried to raise awareness of the online dangers to our children. During the discussion, artificial intelligence was raised as a potentially useful tool. I was pleased to hear that the Artificial Intelligence Strategy Group was set up in November 2021 with the participation of 13 member states and Europol, but I must add that I regret that Hungary is not involved. I'm confident that the group will be successful, and I wish all participants good luck. I believe that artificial intelligence will be an indispensable element in the future of online and offline crime prevention and law enforcement. In order for the European Union to be at the forefront of the world and to guarantee the security of its citizens, we need to constantly research and explore new solutions. In the light of recent and current events, we cannot ignore the military solutions of the future, of which cyber warfare is an integral part. This is typically an area where a lot of data needs to be analyzed, and the environment is changing day by day. The use of artificial intelligence will be essential. Of course, we cannot avoid talking about the ethical issues surrounding artificial intelligence, many of which are very serious. I understand that a working group involving 7 countries has also been set up on this subject. This is no small task, because it is perhaps one of the greatest dilemmas facing humanity today. We can see that Europol is determined to keep pace with technological challenges and developments. I call on the member states to be partners in this, because only in this way can we guarantee the security of our citizens and the future of the European Union. Thank you for your attention.
Je vous remercie.
Thank you. Well, I will now give the floor to Mr. Giedrius Suplis from the Lithuanian Parliament, just to see whether he can now connect to the meeting.
Oui, nous ne vous entendons pas.
No, I'm sorry, we can't hear you. Can you just try again? Your microphone seems to be working, but we can't hear you.
Malheureusement,
we're sorry, we can't hear you and we can't see you, so I do apologize, dear colleague. We're going to now give the floor to our 3 panelists to respond. If you can connect, please raise your flag and I'll give you the floor. But let me give the floor, first of all, to President Bonnet of the European Management Board. I'm going to actually take you in the reverse order by giving the floor, first of all, to Mr. Bonnet, then Madame de Boll, and then the EDPS. Thank you very much. A number of questions actually fall under the remit of the executive director, I believe, but I did want to respond to one question which was raised about, and that was about the budget, because indeed the management board adopts the budget for Europol, and this budget is in constant increase. We have a budget of 192 million euros for 2022, and it's going to increase to 204 million euros for 2024. So as you can see, 16 million have actually been put aside for the implementation of the new mandate, because it's going to have some budgetary impact. I just wanted to touch on the question of AI as well. This is also a challenge for us, but it's also an opportunity. AI is something that Europol can benefit from, because because it will help us to properly use personal data. This artificial intelligence will enable us to categorize data in a satisfactory manner and to treat it, to process it well. So these are the points I wanted to come back on, if I may. Thank you very much. I'll give the floor now to the Executive Director of Europol, Madame de Boll.
Madam Chair.
Madam Chair.
To the question of Mrs. Dali. So as I mentioned already before, I cannot publicly give operational details about a private case. But as I said, we receive around 500 data subject access requests a year, with around 10% of hits. We hold information about, and in 2% we cannot give access to the data, because it is established with the national authorities that access may not be given. In the case mentioned by Madame Dali, the information in the media that Europol is still holding data in the case of this data subject is incorrect. And the status of the individual case is that the file is now with the EDPS, and Europol provided input to the EDPS on this case. I also provided the data subject with the person with a letter, and he should have received the information by now. He should have received the answer. Then Mr. Veke, I would like to thank you for the support you mentioned to the new mandate. On the big data challenge, new tools like Sirius, already in use in Europol, to help member states how to deal and how to request data with service providers online, to help them how to get data. Is important, and also Percy is important for us, and it is very important to strike, of course, the balance between data protection and efficiency. I am sure you will have a good overview this afternoon delivered by my colleague Mr. Ebner on AI, the innovation and the things we do at Europol related to artificial intelligence. The complexity and the volume of the data in structured and in unstructured data sets makes it necessary for law enforcement community to have artificial intelligence solutions to minimize the risks for the data subjects, and to allow to do pre-processing to get the relevant data out of the irrelevant data. When I think, for instance, of threat to life messages, to get access to these threat to life messages in an acceptable time frame, therefore you need quickly identify this threat to life message, and therefore you have the need to use artificial intelligence tools. Mr. Zikats, related to money laundering, we saw in the SOCTA that more than 30% of the organized crime groups make use of money laundering service provider. providers. It's a priority to launch financial and economic crime investigations, and therefore we created in 2020 the Economic and Financial Crime Center. And we are very happy with the anti-money laundering initiative, the legislative package. We see it as an opportunity to have a more comprehensive approach, but of course law enforcement need to be part of it, and we need to be sure that we do not create duplication, and we need to bridge the gaps between criminal and financial data. That is why for Europol and for the law enforcement community as a whole, it is important to have cooperation with the FIUs and to have strong links with the anti-money laundering authorities. It's crucial in the task to fight financial crime. The question related to the budget from Mr. Metsu. For this moment, yes, we receive supplementary resources linked to the changes in the new legal framework. There will be a top-up of 178 million euros split across different years and 160 temporary agents. We can also keep the 235 contract agents. We can count on these resources from the moment that the new Europol regulation will enter into force. Related to interoperability, there we see the need for more discussion related to the future developments. When I talk about Belgium and the cooperation with Belgium, we are together, not only with Belgium, but with some other countries, working on a harbour project. The harbours of Rotterdam and the harbours of Antwerp are very important for serious and organized crime organizations. We have a very good information exchange with the Belgian authorities, and we also support the Belgian authorities in the small boats, Projet La Manche, related to migration. Then when we talk about fundamental rights officer, fundamental rights agency and DPF, of course we stand ready to share as much information as possible with the scrutiny group related to this function. We have already a very good cooperation with the Fundamental Rights Agency. They foresee, for instance, training sessions for guest experts that will be deployed in the hotspots in the different countries where we deploy them. And I am sure that the Fundamental Rights Officer will also in that area play an important role. Madame Bricmont, on the GPSG questions, we are very careful to be as extensive as possible, but we have also an obligation related to operational data and operational meetings where we have constraints in sharing all the information, and we have also data protection requirements from participants. I will ask my staff an additional investment, but we are already doing a lot of things as we believe that GPSG has a key role for us. Related to the supervisor authority, the European Data Protection Supervisor, since I entered the office in 2018, our investment in supporting the Data Protection Supervisor on European level is more than 20 people that are involved in data protection issues on a daily basis in the agency to make sure that everything we do, that the processing we do is data protection proof. Then the strategic agreement with Russia dates indeed from 2003. There is no liaison officer in the office and there is no operational cooperation. It's a strategic agreement. In the past, we had some study visits from Russian officials to the agency. And then Mr. Van Hatten, related to the jihadi and proactive approach, we have an analytical project, Travelers, And this is an analysis project to identify possible jihadis. An AP is always with a mandate, and the mandate is discussed and with the EDPS supervisor. The legal framework, Mr. Pistorius, is it enough? Can we support investigations? As I already mentioned, we created the Financial and Economic Crime Center in 2020. We can support measures if there are investigations ongoing in member states. So we really need investigations ongoing in member states, then we can support the measures. As we do, for instance, for the Next Generation EU money, we support investigations in member states when there are cases in member states. Is the changes in the legal framework, in the mandate, are they enough? It's too early to evaluate that because it still has to enter into force. But we believe that related to data processing, we will have more possibilities to support better the member states. What we also do is that we support member states through the support to the FIUs, and the Asset Recovery Office Secretariat is at Europol, and this is important also in the support for member states. We have specialists in cryptocurrencies to support member states, and we see an increase in the use of cryptocurrencies by criminal organizations, and we have the public-private partnership with the banks, which is also important in the fight against financial crime. Thank you.
Merci. Thank you very much. And to wind up, we'll hear from the Data Protection Supervisor.
So I have some problems to turn on the camera. I hope it will be possible. Yes, okay, it is possible. Thank you very much for this last round of questions. There were not too many questions that were directly to European Data Protection Supervisor, so I would do very short remarks. First of all, I would like to say that the question which was raised on the access to the data was especially directed to the data which was not assigned to the person, but exists in the resources of the Europol, and during the further analysis, it can be found related with already recognized records. So when there was a question, for example, from Mr. Breyer, if his data would be found, that was mainly directed to this part of the data which is non-structured but which is matched with the data which already have the records. And as far as I know, none of the cases that were so far in the press and in the media and which involved the access to the documents were not about the use of the artificial intelligence tools. We are very happy of Europol using this after the risk analysis is finished, and I hope that these plans that will be presented to the group this afternoon will also include this part which is saying about the mitigation of the risks in these activities. I would like to request not to mix the problems of the cyber war with the problems of the fight with the cybercrime, because the tools which are used for the fight with the cyber war attacks, these are not necessarily the weapons, they're not necessarily the tools which shall be allowed to fight with the cybercrime and to use in the field which is harmonized by the European law. That also goes to the answer to the question that we will have big problems to explain the work of the artificial intelligence if we don't first find the ways to categorize the data ourselves. If we have the problem to find the transparent ways to categorize the information which we have. The artificial intelligence will not help us to make it more transparent. It helps us probably to be done faster, but definitely not to explain how the categorization was done. And that is especially important in the situation of the persons who have the special privileges and the special position in the law, like advocates, for example, like the representatives of the persons, and who, not being categorized, will be matched with the data from the other countries, losing this privileged position they had. I think that was everything which was partly directed, at least, to the European Data Protection Supervisor. Thank you very much for the possibility to share these experiences of last months of the EDPS.
Many thanks. Thank you to all of the parliamentarians for their questions, and thank you for the answers from the three speakers. And before we wind up the morning's session, I'm going to give the floor once again to Mr. López Aguilar. Well, I think I shall conclude this morning's working session, and we will resume at 2 p.m. We'll have the Minister of the Interior and the European Commissioner for Migration and Home Affairs. So we will resume, as I say, at 2 p.m.